Hello! So, welcome to 4AF. To anyone who doesn't know us, my name's Alex, and I have another build project for you. This one is it's going to be a little different to our previous ones. So we've done natural builds, and we've done seasonal builds before, but I wanted to try something out that I've not done yet with you all. Right now, it doesn't look like much. It's just an island and, well, the Minecraft landmass behind me. But I promise we're going to turn this into something really fun. So, let's jump right in and get started. I started by adding my own terrain onto the top of what was already there, smoothing out areas to help me see just what kind of an area that I had to work with. I do this so that I can visualize what I want to build and where. After flattening everything out and getting a rough idea of the scale that I'd be working with, I started building tall mountains with peaks and ridges the likes of which we unfortunately still don't see all that often in Minecraft's natural generation, to give the build a comfortable and cozy vibe. With it being sheltered from the other biomes, I was able to create a believable environment because I'm essentially controlling the backdrop. This build reaches out into the ocean, giving it a slightly more realistic footing for providing the city that I want to build later with food and income. I chose to design the cliffs with those spiky, steeply angled faces as a way to further break the area within the mountain range from the area outside of it. Those jutting spikes are a formation called stacks. Stacks are formed by constant weathering by both the wind and the wave, and they're often portrayed with ships and shipwrecks suspended on their jagged edges.
Oh. I was wondering where that went.
Another geological structure that I use in my builds is plateaus. Because they're flat across the top as the name suggests, they provide an excellent surface to both build upon and link areas of different heights together. They're seen quite often along beaches and on hillsides. Plateaus occur all around the world, and because we're so used to seeing them in such a wide range of places, it's a really good shape for any Minecraft build. Because I want this project to be heavily centred around man-made structures, I need a way to sustain the needs of the villagers that will be living there. That includes drinking water. Fresh water often comes from the snow atop mountains. As the snow melts and travels downward, it forms something called streamflow. Streamflow branches out and winds up connecting to rivers, lakes, and later oceans. This is an extremely small and simplified version of events, but given that this is a fantasy project, I wasn't too concerned about the scale of my modelled build against real-world science. As this project was designed with a fantasy theme, like any good fantasy kingdom, it needed a castle. For the main structure of the castle, I didn't follow any one design, taking inspiration from castles all across Western Europe. Growing up in England, we're taught castles have always been a huge part of our history, and that the castles vary significantly between locations due to demand and situation. Drawing my inspiration from such a wide area left me with a lot of choices to make. Thankfully, most castles follow a similar set of criteria. I'll hand you over to Michael to explain further.
A bailey or ward is a courtyard enclosed by a curtain wall. Curtain walls are tall, thick barricades that surround the keep and castles to shield from invaders. Battlements were made up of two parts, parapets and allures. The parapets are tooth-shaped dwarf walls comprised of crenels and merlons. Crenels are the hollowed dips, and merlons are the raised squares which shelter archers from enemy fire. Allures are walkways that are seated behind the parapets, allowing archers and defending soldiers to patrol the exterior of castle walls. The portcullis is a heavy, spiked, vertically closing barrier, often made from wood or metal, which helps protect the doors from fire and battering, and was lowered by chains from a chamber above the gateway. Drawbridges are a suspended wooden bridge which could be lowered to gain access to a castle, or pulled up preventing enemies from crossing moats. Towers are a fortified vertical structure used in castles along with curtain walls. Castle towers can be a variety of shapes and sizes and fulfill different functions such as artillery, flanking, and archery. Barbicans are a type of fortified gateway, focused on the outer defence perimeter of a city, castle, or any tower that overlooks a gate or bridge, which could be used for defensive purposes. Moats are a dug depression, sometimes filled with water, that surround exterior castle walls. Attackers were easy to shoot while swimming or rowing across moats filled with water, so moats reduced the risk of enemies being able to tunnel under the castle walls. Arrow loops, sometimes referred to as arrow slits, were slight vertical apertures in fortifications and walls through which an archer or crossbowman could shoot at invading forces. They were typically rectangular or cruciform to accommodate either ranged weapon.
Slowing it down a little bit, I continued to frame the backdrop and foundations of what will later become our city, expanding the mountain range and elevating divided areas to break up what might have otherwise been a very flat and boring area. Once I'd divided it up, I filled in the spaces between the future districts with water, creating fresh water streams. These streams would provide water to our villagers and help irrigate crops to feed them. I planned out a rough outline for the city districts, dividing them into merchant, farming, and military sections, before briefly marking out the spaces for some of our future buildings. Once I'd set up the initial camp and central point to work from, I started with the military district. Kingdoms of any kind always have to include strong defences so that they can withstand opposition. Even the greatest of kings and queens dealt with conflict, and with this city being so close to the ocean, our kingdom and therefore its people would be vulnerable to attacks from both the land and the sea. Once I'd shored up our defences, I set to work on another essential part of any kingdom: food. Being so close to the ocean and its brisk sea breeze, crops would have to contend with the cold. So to help them cope, I situated the majority of the kingdom's farms at the highest point, far from the ocean as I could. Placing the fields this high up also had the added benefit of making the distribution of harvests much easier for the villagers. It's easier after all to push an empty cart up a hill than a full one. To finish off the farming district, I built a towering windmill to help the villagers grind their wheat into bread and keep everyone fed, adding in the kingdom's signature blue roofing to top it off. Up next was the merchant district, where I quickly found out just how hard it is to build a small, but ornate fountain. Once I was happy with my design, I set to building the main market square, and what would later become one of my favourite places to look at. With the tall buildings and tiny details, such as washing lines and strung lanterns. In the merchants district, I added several functional areas, one of which was the forge and later Armory. The soldiers manning our barracks would need armour and weapons, both of which would have to be produced here, along with the saddles and armoured equipment for their brave steeds. Happy with how the kingdom was finally coming together, I started the long process of replacing the standard Minecraft grass and stone along the edges and exposed stone faces. Not all of us have Optifine, but thanks to the addition of moss, we can all have some pretty cool, green, organic blocks to decorate our otherwise muddy overhangs. I added some minor texturing, and a small gradient to emphasise the height differences between the different areas. Next up was the docks. I wanted the docks to feel lived in and well loved. Most docks expand over time with the addition of trade routes and the demand for alternative food sources. In this case, however, our kingdom always resided by the sea, and fish would be a major trading resource. To corner the market on fish, our villagers would need the edge on seafaring vessels. I added a bunch of different ships of varying sizes to the jutting platforms, leaving space for the loading and unloading of resources and goods. I made sure to keep the main docks as far from the city as possible though, because no matter how quickly stock moves, in a medieval kingdom like this one, preservatives only lasted so long, and no one wants to wake up and open their windows to that strange fishy smell in the morning. Most of the city buildings were constructed with a mix of wood and stone, typical of medieval architecture. As such, certain types of wood could be sold by merchants for a pretty price. But without the space to farm the trees, the merchants had to haul their logs up from the city's designated lumber and milling area, an area that turned out to be, despite its unfortunate purpose, one of my favourite areas of the whole project. As mentioned before, the kingdom backs right onto the ocean, and as such needs protection against seafaring attackers and enemy naval forces. Typical defences include gunships, towers, lighthouses, and walls built out at sea to prevent enemy ships from closing in on the shoreline. No fantasy kingdom would be complete without a bustling market metropolis. As the centre for trade, small businesses, farm goods, and even livestock, markets were huge and were often depended upon by villagers to procure their food and livelihoods. As this is a fantasy market, I made sure to make use of bright, fairground-esque colours in place of the kingdom's signature blue, to bring home the idea that not all of these stands would have been owned by citizens of our kingdom, but quite often people from all over the world. And finally, last but not least, I added a place to store livestock within the kingdom. Animals would have made up a large part of the villagers' diet and jobs. And with the animal storage complete, this fantasy build project is finally finished.
We hope you all enjoyed watching it come together as much as we enjoyed working on it. It took us a very long time to get it just how we wanted it, but we're so happy with how it turned out, and we hope you are too.
That said, thank you all for sticking around till the end. We really appreciate it, so until next time, goodbye!
And tiddle pip!